tied to a plow and driven like an ox all summer long. A cowboy unhooked the yoke and gave her soft soil. The rope was still around her wrists when I found her. Not tied to anything anymore. She'd worked free of the post, or someone had cut her loose and left, but her hands were still crossed at the wrists out of habit, like her body hadn't learned yet that she could hold them apart. She was sitting against the wheel of a broke-down wagon at the edge of Hector Prute's east field, and the field behind her was plowed. 12 acres of hardpan caliche turned. She'd done it. You could see the line where the plow handle had worn through the leather of her right glove, through the glove into the heel of her hand. I was riding fence line, which was how I came on her. My spread ran along Prute's eastern border, and I'd been putting off that ride for a week because it was September and still hot enough to bake a man through his shirt. I almost turned back at the dry creek. I'm glad I didn't. I didn't know her name then. I'd seen her twice at the trading post in Silo Plano, once at a distance, a woman with Prute and 3 of his hired men. She was small and dark-haired, and I hadn't thought much about it because in those years I didn't think much about anything that wasn't mine to tend to. That's what living alone a long time does to a man. You get practical about what you let your eyes land on. Her name was Celeste Vargas. Her father had run cattle on a small piece south of Prute's until a bad winter and a worse spring took the herd, and then took him. She'd been 17. Prute had moved in with a contract, the kind a girl alone can't read well enough to fight, and for 3 years she'd been paying her father's debts in labor. His fields, his kitchen, whatever he said. I didn't know any of that yet, sitting my horse and looking down at her. What I knew was the rope marks. What I knew was 12 acres of fresh-turned ground and a woman who could barely lift her arms. What I knew was that Prute's place was a quarter mile to the west, and nobody had come to check on her. I got down. She didn't look at me scared. That surprised me. She looked at me the way a person looks at weather, something happening that she'd have to account for. I asked her if she was all right, and she said, "I'll be fine by morning," like she'd been telling herself that every night for 3 years, and it had become the same as breathing. I asked her if she could ride. She said she didn't know. I said that was good enough, and I helped her up. My name is Dale Creed. I want to say that plainly because this is my story and I don't tell it often. I'm 61 years old now, and I've been many things: trail hand, scout for the Army for a short stretch I don't talk about, failed miner, successful enough rancher by the time I found her. I've been alone on my place for 4 years since my brother left for California. I had 700 acres, a good well, a spring herd that had come through healthy, and nobody to hand anything to. A man can build something solid and still feel it meaning nothing. I'm not complaining. I'm just telling you the shape of things. I brought her to my house. I put her in the room my brother had used, and I boiled water and found clean cloth, and she let me wrap her hands without saying much. The heel of the right one was raw down to something that didn't look like skin anymore. She held still for it. I've seen men cry at half that. I made coffee, and she drank it standing at the window, looking out at the dark like she was waiting for Prute's men to come up the track. I said, "You're not going back." She said, "That's not something you decide." I said, "No, it's something I'm telling you. You're not going back." She looked at me then, not grateful, not relieved. She looked at me the way you look at a wall you're not sure will hold, trying to judge the thickness, the mortar, whether it'll still be standing come morning. I let her look. Prute came the next day, 2 men with him, which told me he thought he'd need the weight. I met them at the gate. I had my rifle in the crook of my arm, not raised, just present the way a fact is present. We talked for about 4 minutes. I won't pretend it was clean or easy. He had paper, a contract, and he used words like obligation and debt and lawful arrangement. I used words too, quieter ones, about what a man can prove and what a county judge might think about rope marks on a woman's wrists, and about how far it was to town and how long it would take him to get there and back. He left. I don't say that to make myself sound larger than I am. I was scared. My hands were steady, but my chest was going like a hammer on an anvil, and when I walked back to the house, I sat down on the step and just breathed for a while before I went inside. She was watching from the window. She'd seen the whole thing. She didn't say thank you. Not right then. She said, "He'll come back." I said, "Maybe." She said, "You know he will." I said, "I know." And then I said, "I've been alone on this place for 4 years. I could use the help if you're willing to work for fair wages and your own room. Nobody ropes you to anything here. You work what you choose and you stop when you choose, and what you earn is yours." She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought she was going to say no, and I was already trying to think of what else I could offer. She said, "Show me what needs doing." That first month was strange the way new things are strange. She moved through my house like she was mapping it, learning its sounds and where the floorboards talked and which window let in the morning. She cooked, not because I asked her to, but because she said cooking was the one thing Prout hadn't ruined for her. She was good at it. She made things out of nothing, dried chilies and old cornmeal and the last of a side of pork, and something came out of it that made me sit at that table longer than I needed to. She helped with the stock in the afternoons. She was small, but she wasn't weak. 3 years behind a plow had put muscle on her that didn't show until you saw her work. She could lift a feed sack that would make a softer man grunt. She knew horses, better than she let on at first. Prout came back, twice. The second time he came with a man who said he was from the county, and I said I'd be happy to ride in with him and discuss the matter before the actual judge, and that ended it. After that second time, she came and stood next to me at the gate after they'd gone, and she said, "I didn't think anyone would do that for me." Just plain, like she was noting the temperature. I said, "It's the right thing." She said, "A lot of men know the right thing." I didn't have an answer for that. She was right. November came cold that year, a hard, fast cold that dropped out of the north without warning. We lost a calf to it the first night. I was up before light and she was already up, had been up, because she'd heard the mother making noise and she'd gone to check and found the calf down and brought it into the barn and was working on it with dry straw and her own body heat when I got there. We saved it. Between us, an hour in the cold, the calf shuddering, and then steadying and finally standing up on legs that didn't work right yet but worked. She looked across the calf at me. Her hair was loose and there was straw in it and her breath was coming out white in the lamplight. She was smiling, not a big smile. Just something that reached her eyes, which was different from anything I'd seen her face do before. I knew then you don't have to explain those moments. They just are what they are. She stayed the winter. In the spring, she went with me to town to file some papers on a water easement, and on the way back she said she wanted to show me something. She took me east to the far edge of my property where there was a piece of ground I didn't use, a gentle, low-lying piece that held moisture longer than the rest, and she said, "This would grow. If you broke it right, not caliche hard like Prout's, soft ground, it would grow." I looked at the piece. I'd ridden past it 100 times and never thought about it. I said, "What would you put in it?" She said, "First year, squash and beans. Second year, corn if we irrigate it right. After that, whatever you want." She'd said we without thinking about it, and I don't think she noticed she had, but I did. I said, "Let's break it." She chose me. I want to say that plainly too, the way I said my name, because it matters. I did not convince her. I did not rescue her in some way that put her in my debt. She was not grateful in the bent-down way of someone who has no other options. She had healed by spring into a woman who could have gone anywhere, found work in town, found passage further west, found a dozen things. She stayed because she looked at what I was, the work I did, the way I held to a thing, the way I'd stood at that gate twice for her, and she decided that was worth staying for. The night she told me so, we were sitting on the porch after supper, and she just reached over and put her hand on mine on the railing and left it there. Not squeezing, just there. Her hand was still scarred at the heel. It always would be. I turned my hand over and held hers. We've been married 31 years. The east piece grows corn now, mostly, some squash along the south edge where she likes it. The well is deep and good. The house has 2 more rooms than it used to. Her sister's family came out from Sonora 8 years ago and built on the parcel to the north, and now there's always somebody's kid running the fence line between our places. I'm still not a man who talks much. She figured that out in the first week, and she was fine with it. She talks enough for the both of us, which is a thing I love about her, though I don't say it often. She knows. What I'll tell you is this. I was a man building something in the dark, 4 years alone, adding to a thing I couldn't name the purpose of. And then I came around the east corner of Prout's broke-down field on a September morning, and there was a woman sitting against a wagon wheel with rope marks on her wrists and 12 acres plowed behind her. I couldn't leave her there. And she, when she was whole and healed and free and didn't owe me a thing in the world, she looked at all of it. The work, the ground, the man standing at the gate with a rifle in the crook of his arm, and she decided to put her hand on mine. That's the whole of it. The east field's green right now. I can see it from here.